Okay, sorry for another interruption. One young lady who is my wife's oldest niece had just come back from an errand where I sent her to buy some milk. And then Trump. On top of that, you're going to pay more taxes. Misleading. Democrats have called for rolling back some of the Trump tax cuts for corporations and wealthy individuals, so reducing them, but not necessarily for the middle class. The individual tax cuts in the Trump tax cut mostly expire in 2025 and will require a vote in the Congress to be extended. John Tester, I feel a little guilty because, he did run the most beautiful commercial. I heard yesterday it started, and he's like my best friend, President Trump this, President Trump that. This claim was accurate. Tester did start running an ad just before Trump's arrival, highlighting bills that Trump signed on veterans issues, in which Tester, the ranking Democrat on the Veterans Affairs Committee, played a major role. The ad is a compilation of President Trump talking about John Tester bills he signed into law. A Tester spokesman said, often at his rallies when he lists off his accomplishments, President Trump praises John Tester legislation. During the Billings rally, he talked about FREE, the Virginia Mission Act, or a Veterans Affairs Mission Act, the Veterans Affairs Accountability Act. So, the first one was the Veterans Affairs Mission Act. The second one, the Veterans Affairs Accountability Act, and the Banking Regulatory Relief Bill. Yeah, so finally he had something good to say about a Democrat. The age of miracles is truly not over. He's taken more cash from lobbyists than almost anyone in the entire Senate. Accurate. As of August 21st, 2018, Tester ranks second in the Senate in the current election cycle in terms of contributions from lobbyists after Senator Sherrod Brown, a Democrat from Ohio, according to OpenSecrets.org. He ranked first in 2012 when he last ran for re-election. I've only run once, and that was for president, and I won. He was talking about running for public elective office, and it is mostly accurate. He briefly did, however, establish an exploratory committee for a presidential run in 2000 to win the Reform Party nomination, but seeing probably that he had no realistic chance of becoming the nominee or of becoming president, he ended the effort after only a few months. And then, talking about Dr. Ronnie L. Jackson. He's actually the doctor that gave me my physical, and he said that I'm in great shape. Well, mostly accurate. But however, we should remember that Trump is already 72 years old, and definitely he's no longer in as great physical shape as he was, for example, in his teens, 20s, 30s, or 40s. Besides, while he's a leaner man than the hugely or like massively overweight U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, I say this with no malice, even President Trump is visibly overweight, with a double chin of sorts, and with a somewhat bulging stomach. Ironically, the previous Republican President George W. Bush, who did care even as president about his physical shape, is clearly trimmer than Trump. And so was his immediate predecessor, Democrat and former President Barack Obama. And so in January 2018, Jackson said, "The president's overall health is excellent. His cardiac, meaning heart, performance during his physical exam was very good," he said, though he added, "We discussed diet, exercise, and weight loss. He would benefit from a diet that is lower in fat and carbohydrates and from a routine exercise regimen. And amen to that, I would add." Actually, the ones that are really good, meaning the books that are really good about him, are number 1, 2, and 3 on the bestsellers list Right. False. Number 1 on the New York Times hardcover bestseller list for August the 19th to 25th, 2018 was Unhinged, a highly critical look by former Trump aide Mrs. Omarosa Manigault Newman, whom Trump viciously blasted as a crying lowlife and a dog on Twitter. Yes, it is true that Mrs. Manigault Newman did use highly confidential discussions that she had secretly and illegally taped in the Oval Office when she was about to be dismissed. But still, morally, President Trump had no right to call her essentially a non-human being, an animal. Number 2 is The Russia Hoax, a pro-Trump book by Greg Jarrett. The third book is not Trump-related, but number 4 is House of Trump, House of Putin, a critical book by Craig Unger. So once again, he mixed truth and falsehood. Apparently he thinks that he can get away with anything as long as he retains that core support. But I pray that by God's grace he will come to repentance, and that is what I pray for myself and for many other people as well. Admiral Jackson, his reputation was attacked, and all of those terrible, horrible things that were said about him turned out to be lies, and they turned out to be false, misleading. Tester, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Veteran Affairs Committee, made public several allegations against Rear Admiral Ronnie L. Jackson. The White House conducted a review that found evidence of minor incidents, but not the most serious allegations Tester had described, and the Secret Service released a statement denying several allegations. The Defense Department Inspector General is investigating Jackson but has not released a report. Republicans believe Jackson to be unqualified, and Tester's actions had, interestingly enough, the support of Veterans Affairs Committee Chairman Senator Johnny Isakson, a Republican, from Georgia, so President Trump's colleague. So in that statement, he was contradicting a party colleague. In the last election, Washington Democrats put John Tester in charge of electing extreme liberals. I mean, I'm talking about serious liberals, many of whom are watching attacking Judge Kavanaugh and looking like fools, frankly, looking like fools. False. Tester was chairperson of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee for the 2015 to 2016 election cycle, in which Democrats gained only 2 seats, Tammy Duckworth of Illinois and Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire. Apparently Trump was speaking about Kamala D. Harris, a Democrat from California, who was elected in 2016 and is on the Judiciary Committee. It's a matter of opinion, so a debatable claim about whether Tester was in charge of electing extreme liberals. The DSCC did not endorse either Harris or her opponent, Representative Loretta Sanchez, a Democrat from California, in the general election. The next claim: we have 25,000 people showing up to speeches. False. None of Trump's post-election rallies attracted 25,000 people. Most have been under 10,000. Then another claim: I beat 17 great Republicans. I beat senators. I beat governors. A couple of people, great people like Ben Carson. I beat a lot of great people. Ben Carson was tough, but I beat 17 great people. And I respectfully say I beat the Bush dynasty. Okay, that felt good. Pretty recently, okay. Now I have the privilege of going against crooked Hillary Clinton, so I beat crooked Hillary. Mostly accurate. Trump beat 16 other Republican candidates, including former Florida Governor Jeb Bush. He was the 17th candidate. She, meaning Hillary Clinton, forgot to go to a couple of very important states. Gee, I don't think I'm going to go to Michigan too much. I don't think I'm going to go, she said, to Wisconsin. Mostly accurate. A couple of states is one too many. Clinton did not go to Wisconsin after the Democratic Convention, mainly spending time in swing states that she did not need to win. and lost to Trump. Clinton, in her election memoir, has pushed back at the theory that not campaigning enough in certain states cost her the election. She said she invested in resources in Wisconsin and Trump did not win more votes than Mitt Romney in 2012. There was no surge in Republican turnout, she wrote. Instead, enough voters switched, stayed home, or went for third parties in the final days to cost me the state. Mainly, in her view, because FBI Director James B. Comey's letter on the email controversy 10 days before the election. Clinton had used a private email server to exchange emails about policy matters. While serving as the US Secretary of State or Foreign Minister. I beat Hillary, who stole it from Bernie. Bernie should have won, but that's okay. They stole it. Superdelegates. How do you like superdelegates? But she's got superdelegates that were handed to her. False. Clinton did not have all of the superdelegates or Democratic Party officials from the start. She could claim about half of them in November 2015, about 3 months before the first primary votes. But she would have won the nomination even sooner if superdelegates had not existed, as she won substantially more delegates in the primary and caucus votes. Charles Krauthammer, when I announced that I was going to run, he said, why would he run? This is he didn't know me, so I'm not insulted. He said, this is the finest field of Republicans ever assembled. I actually did. I looked at my wife. I said, that's his business. He just said, these are the finest ever assembled. Why am I doing this? And then I said, that's okay. I'll do it anyway. Accurate. Trump here was referring to an interview with the late Washington Post columnist on Fox News after he had announced he was running for president, where Krauthammer did indeed criticize the tenor and substance of Trump's speech. These are eruptions, barstool eruptions, he said, and the pity is this is the strongest field of Republican candidates in 35 years. We have new deals made. We have a deal we just made with Mexico. That's a fair deal. It's not that horrendous deal that was made years ago that should have been changed years ago. Misleading. Trump announced an agreement with Mexico, but the Mexican government says it is contingent on reaching an agreement with Canada. Any new North American free trade agreement must be approved by Congress, and what Trump has been negotiating would modify NAFTA but largely leave the structure intact. Last year we had a trade deficit with China of anywhere from $375 billion with a B dollars to, $504 billion. Either one is not acceptable. Accurate. Trump often claims the trade deficit with China is $500 billion, but here he acknowledges there is a lower overall number. The trade deficit in goods and services in 2017 with China was $375 billion, according to the Census Bureau. The goods deficit alone was $505 billion. However, the late Bible prophecy teacher and writer, pastor, and even Bible prophecy student, Tim LaHaye, in one of his last books, Are We Living in the End Times, quoted some person familiar with these figures as saying that the true trade deficit may be much higher than that, even maybe over could it be $1 trillion? Well, you can check the quote on that. I just came on stage and I was told that Kim Jong-un said some terrific things about me. He said I have faith in President Trump. He said very strongly that we want to denuclearize North Korea during President Trump's tenure. This claim was accurate. South Korean envoy Chung Eudong, who met Kim, said he made it clear that his trust in President Trump remains and will remain unchanged, even though there have recently been some difficulties in negotiations between the North and the United States. He said he wished he could eliminate 70 years of hostile history with the United States, improve North Korea-US relations, and realize denuclearization within the first term of President Trump. But in the meantime, even if he, meaning Kim, didn't, even if he didn't, we got our hostages back. There's been no more missile testing. There's been no more rockets flying over Japan. There's been no more nuclear testing. Misleading. Trump highlights the visible fruits of his talks with the North Korean dictator. However, the Washington Post reported in June 2018 that US intelligence officials, citing newly obtained evidence, have concluded that North Korea does not intend to fully surrender its nuclear stockpile, and instead is considering ways to conceal the number of weapons it has and conceal production facilities. We got back our hostages. I didn't pay $1.8 billion. We got back our hostages. Paid nothing. We paid nothing. Misleading. Trump is comparing his dealings with North Korea to Obama's dealings with Iran. Obama did not pay any ransom for the release of detainees in North Korea. In the case of Iran, the money in question, which was actually $1.7 billion, was Iran's all along, and was sent by the Obama administration to settle a decades-old claim. US officials insist it was a coincidence that 4 American hostages, including the Washington Post's Jason Rezaian, were released the same day as the first $400 million tranche was delivered. We're paying for NATO. We're paying this massive percentage of cost. False. The United States is the largest contributor to NATO's organizational expenses, which includes its headquarters in Brussels, Belgium, and subordinate military commands, but it funds only 22% of these programs. Separately, the US defense expenditure represents 72% of defense spending across all NATO members, but this reflects what the United States spends on all military programs, not just those related to Europe. I got them to pay billions of dollars more. They couldn't believe for years NATO spending was going like this. False. NATO's guideline is that defense expenditure should amount to 2% of each country's gross domestic product by 2024. In 2017, the United States and 3 other countries met that standard, and Poland spent virtually 2%. NATO allies have been steadily boosting defense spending since 2014 after Russia annexed Crimea. In any case, these funds would not be going to the United States or even necessarily to NATO. This is money that countries would spend to bolster their own militaries. Secretary Stoltenberg, Secretary General, head of NATO, he says, you know how much they paid extra? $44 billion. That was last year. Misleading. During a visit to Washington in May 2018, former Norwegian Prime Minister and the current NATO Secretary General, Mr. Jens Stoltenberg, said Trump had made a real impact pushing for more defense spending from NATO allies. But again, this trend began in 2014 after Russia annexed Crimea. In July 2018, Stoltenberg told reporters that NATO nations had committed an extra $41 billion in spending since Trump took office in January 2017. French President Emmanuel Macron, however, denied that any agreement had been reached to increase expenditures beyond previously agreed targets. At constant 2010 dollars and exchange rates, the other 28 NATO members are anticipated to increase defense spending by $11.4 billion. He, meaning Tester, will come home and tell you about your Second Amendment. Then he'll vote for something where you knock out of it. Expletive deleted. False. Tester has an A- rating from the National Rifle Association. His website states, as a gun owner, John has voted against legislation that would violate Montanans' Second Amendment rights and hinder the ability of law-abiding citizens to purchase and own a gun. Look at his voting. It's the same voting as Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and the legendary Maxine. False. Tester has voted with Trump 36.8% of the time. In other words, over 1/3 of the time, according to 538. He has voted to confirm several of the president's cabinet officials and has supported major pieces of legislation Trump supported, including a rollback of some Dodd-Frank regulations and expanding private care options for veterans. Democrat Charles Schumer of New York, by contrast, and he's a senator, has voted with Trump 25% of the time, while former House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi and her colleague Maxine Waters have voted with Trump 20% and 10.1% respectively. John Tester voted no on tax cuts. Accurate. Tester voted against the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, saying that although he favored parts of the bill, he believed it was tilted too much toward the wealthy. And he voted for the Obamacare disaster, which we almost repealed and replaced, but we'll get it done. Accurate. Tester voted for the Affordable Care Act, and Trump failed to repeal it. And an instrumental person in that failure was the recently deceased Senator John McCain, a fellow Republican. We got rid of the most unpopular element of Obamacare right, the individual mandate, where you have the right to pay a fortune for the privilege of not having to pay a fortune for bad health care. Mostly accurate. The tax bill included repeal of the individual mandate and the requirement to buy insurance or pay a relatively small fine, not a fortune. And the individual mandate fares relatively poorly in opinion polls. But much has to do with the wording of the question, with support growing to majority approval if respondents are told more details about how it works. Obamacare was going up 115%, 125%, 80%, 60%, 53%, all different places. It was going up massively. Misleading. The highest increase in Obamacare premiums in 2017 was in Arizona at 116%, followed by Oklahoma at 69% and Tennessee at 63%. The average increase, I believe it is the average of the 50 states and Washington, D.C., was 25%. But most people were not affected, since few Americans buy health insurance through the exchange marketplace, and about 70% of those who do are protected from premium increases through cost subsidies. Trump does not mention that premiums increased in 2018 and 2019 because of changes made to the law under his administration, including repeal of the individual mandate. Another claim. He voted no on Kate's Law. Accurate. Tester voted against an earlier version of Kate's Law. He voted no on enhanced vetting for refugees. Accurate. Tester in 2016 voted against legislation that would have imposed additional background checks for refugees trying to enter the United States. He also opposed the president's travel ban. And John Tester voted in favor of deadly sanctuary cities. Misleading. This claim lacks context. A Tester spokesman says the senator opposes sanctuary cities and thinks they are a symptom of our broken immigration system. John Tester voted for very liberal Obama judges 99% of the time. Misleading. This statement also lacks context, as most of Obama's judges were approved without controversy by Republicans and Democrats. There were 12 contested appeal court nominations, and Tester voted for all of them. However, according to records maintained by Russell Wheeler of the Brookings Institution, 70% of district judges and 58% of appeals court nominees were approved unanimously or by voice vote. In other words, not recorded. Another 11% of district nominees and 15% of appeals court nominees received under 10 no votes. John Tester voted against our incredible Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. Accurate. Gorsuch was first in his class at Harvard, first in his class at Oxford. False. Gorsuch graduated from Harvard Law School cum laude, which is an honors designation but below magna cum laude and summa cum laude. Very few students earn summa cum laude. The next 10% earn magna cum laude, and the next 30% earn cum laude, according to Harvard. That Electoral College, we won by a lot. False. Trump narrowly won the Electoral College, as a swing of less than 50,000 votes would have flipped 3 states and cost him the election. Yes, he did receive. Maybe I have to check this. Okay. In the United States presidential election, he did receive 304 electors out of 300 and out of 538. Sorry, compared to Hillary Clinton's 227, because there were a total of 7 so-called faithless electors. 3 of them voted for former U.S. Chief of Staff, General Colin Powell, who then served as Secretary of State in the Bush administration, the second Bush administration, sorry. 1 voted for John Kasich, or Kasich, one of Trump's challengers in the Republican primaries. 1 for Ron Paul, the now outgoing U.S. House of Representatives Speaker. 1 for Senator Bernie Sanders, who challenged Hillary Clinton for the Democratic presidential nomination, and then 1 for Faith Spotted Eagle. And we have to remember that Trump actually lost the popular vote. Some 62,985,000 American citizens voted for Donald Trump, or 46.1%. Some 65,854,000 American citizens voted for Hillary Clinton. That was 48.2%. Although Trump continues to claim that there was massive fraud in the, or has claimed at least once after the election, despite winning, that there was massive fraud, and he actually won also the popular vote. The facts tell otherwise. Yeah, he's one of the few elected presidents to have lost the popular vote. The previous one, incidentally, was also a Republican, George W. Bush, in his first presidential election victory in 2000, when he lost the popular vote by over 500,000 votes to Democratic Vice President Al Gore. You look at the Washington Post or the New York Times, I can never get a good story. I mean, you look at this horrible thing that took place today. It's really, is it subversion? Is it treason? It's a horrible thing. False. Trump poses this as a question, but it's not even one. Treason against the United States is limited under Article 3 of the Constitution to levying war against the United States or adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. Writing an unflattering editorial about the president is pretty remote from either of those categories, and it is covered and protected by the freedoms of speech, opinion, and the press. Is Trump against these basic democratic freedoms just because he is then severely criticized by millions of people in the United States? Partly because of his wicked behavior. There is a very big difference between disloyalty to a president and disloyalty to the United States, said Carlton F.W. Larson, a professor of law at the University of California at Davis and author of a forthcoming book on treason. You know, when I won the election, the New York Times, all their subscribers were leaving. And when I'm ultimately no longer president, and hopefully about 6.5 years from now, the New York Times will go out of business. All of them will be out of business. CNN will be out of business. They're almost out of business now. If you look at their ratings, out of business. False. New York Times subscriptions soared after Trump's election, with the fourth quarter of 2016 its best in history in terms of online subscriber growth. Trump seems to suggest that will end after he leaves the presidency. CNN's ratings have also been boosted by the Trump bump. According to the network, the second quarter of 2018, meaning April to June, was its third best second quarter in 23 years, with near record high viewership in both total viewers and adults ages 25 to 54. The New York Times, you remember, it's very famous. Nobody's ever seen it before. Maybe never done before. They apologized for their bad coverage of me. False. The New York Times did not apologize to its subscribers for its coverage of Trump. Had I not won, we would have been in negative. We wouldn't be at 4.2% growth. We would have been in negative numbers. We're going down. We were going down. We were low, and we were headed down. Unsupported. When Trump was elected, the economy was already doing well, with the unemployment rate falling and the stock market rising. Trump has no basis to claim that the economy would have suddenly reversed course. In fact, he had even claimed that unless he won the Republican presidential candidacy, there would be riots. And apparently, he will claim during his next presidential election campaign in 2019 and 2020 that unless he's re-elected, there will be chaos in the United States or something like that. As if it depended on him. It doesn't. Ultimately, it depends on God and his merciful providence. Something that Donald Trump is reluctant to recognize, even though he claims that he's a Christian. Nancy Pelosi said yesterday she wants to raise your taxes. Misleading. Pelosi, the leading Democrat in the U.S., I think she's still the minority leader in the U.S. House of Representatives, said she wants to reopen the tax bill and strengthen middle-class tax cuts due to expire in 2025, while rolling back tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations. We're respected again as a nation. We're respected again as a nation. Well, he's by no means the first U.S. president to make that claim. Deja vu Reagan, for example. Polls by Gallup and the Pew Global Attitudes Project show worldwide views of the United States and its president have become more negative since Trump took office. The Washington Post and others have reported that world leaders and allied nations are often baffled or upset by Trump's actions and pronouncements. Republicans stand for stopping illegal immigration, fixing horrible trade deals, cutting your taxes in a major way. Biggest tax cut in the history of our country. False. Trump's tax cut is nearly 0.9% of GDP, much smaller than Reagan's tax cut in 1981, which was 2.89% of GDP. Trump's tax cut is the 8th largest since 1918, smaller than 2 tax cuts passed under Obama. And in addition to that, we've got ANWR. You know what that is? Right in Alaska. They've been trying to get that approved for 50 years. We got it approved. Mostly accurate. President Dwight Eisenhower first created the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge over 50 years ago. However, most of the legislative action on whether to allow oil exploration has taken place since 1980, when an expansion of the refuge prohibited oil and natural gas production in the refuge as a whole without congressional authorization. Trump's tax bill removed ANWR's coastal plain from the prohibition. Then, Democrats are going to get rid of ICE so that as the crime comes in, we're going to have none of our people that are so tough. These are great people, but these are tough, strong. These are warriors. Misleading. Some Democrats have been calling to abolish U.S. immigration and customs enforcement, but it's not a widely held position, and some Democrats say the agency should be reformed, not abolished. In any case, ICE is only one of several agencies tasked with immigration enforcement. The last time Democrats were in power, they cut Medicare by more than $700 billion to pay for the scandalous Obamacare. Now Democrats want to steal trillions of dollars from Medicare. False. Trump referred here to an old 2012 claim made by Republicans that Obama took $700 billion from Medicare to fund the Affordable Care Act. The savings mostly were wrung from healthcare providers, not Medicare beneficiaries, who, as a result of the healthcare law, ended up with new benefits for preventive care and prescription drugs. The Obama healthcare law also raised Medicare payroll taxes by $318 billion over the 10-year time frame, further strengthening the company's financial condition. Republicans in Congress and the Trump administration in their budget plans have pocketed virtually all of those savings and sought even more reductions in Medicare spending on top of that. They will destroy your Social Security, and I'm going to save your Social Security. We're not touching your Social Security. False. Democrats have not proposed plans that would reduce Social Security benefits, unlike some Republicans, and in fact many have pushed for greater benefits. I could do that whole thing, the wall, in 1 year, but these guys are holding back. False. There is no way that the border wall, meaning along the US-Mexican border, could be built in a year. According to estimates, it could take at least several years. So in the scenario that Trump is only a single-term president, even in January 2021, when he would, under that scenario, leave office, it would still be not completed. Or it could even happen that in case he managed to win and serve out a second term, he would still not see in January 2025 the entire wall fully finalized. In Maryland, the Democrat candidate for governor wants to give illegal aliens free college tuition courtesy of the American taxpayer. Misleading. Maryland Democrat Ben Jealous has proposed providing free community college tuition for all Maryland residents, including undocumented immigrants brought to the United States as children, commonly referred to as dreamers. Trump himself has claimed he would like to find a way for dreamers to stay. Governor Larry Hogan, a Republican, has said he thinks dreamers ought to be able to qualify for tuition aid at community colleges. People have no idea how bad they MS-13 are. Nancy Pelosi got extremely angry at me when she started yelling, "They are human beings, don't talk to them like that. Don't call them animals." Remember, she said, "Don't call them animals." False. Trump appeared to suggest on May the 16th, 2018, that illegal immigrants were animals. But he clarified on Twitter that on May the 18th that he was referring to MS-13, complaining again that the media had misinterpreted his remarks. I mean, again was my addition, but that's what he keeps claiming. On May the 17th, Pelosi had said calling people animals is not a good thing and had defended undocumented immigrants. And she was speaking more generally about undocumented immigrants, and she did not yell at Trump. If I would have said this on the campaign trail, if I would have used 4.2%, you saw it was adjusted upward from 4.1%, 4.2% GDP, the press would have gone after me. They would have said impossible. False. Trump touts second quarter GDP growth, in other words, April to June 2018, of 4.2%, suggesting that the figure was unheard of before he took office. However, in the second quarter of 2014, so from April to June of that year, GDP growth hit 5.1%. Who was then serving as US President? Barack Obama. Moreover, Trump regularly promised 4% annual growth when he campaigned for president. Jobless claims just fell to a 50-year low. 50 years. This claim was accurate. Jobless claims for that week were the lowest since 1969. We've created over 4 million new jobs since the election. False. Trump often inflates his totals by including nearly 3 months when he was not yet president. At the time of this speech, 3.4 million jobs had been created during the first 19 years of his presidency, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And even this monthly rate of job growth is lower than that of the last 19 months of Obama's presidency. We've lifted almost 4 million Americans off of food stamps. False. According to data as of June the 18th, 2018, 2.8 million fewer people collect food stamps since Trump took office. But this trend began before Trump took office. We've added over 400,000 new manufacturing jobs that the Democrats say are gone. And that number is going to very shortly, with that what's happening in certain areas, be well over 600,000 manufacturing jobs. False. US manufacturing employment has been increasing at a steady rate since 2010. And Democrats had not said manufacturing was going away. African American unemployment recently achieved the lowest, think of this, the lowest ever recorded in the history of our country. Misleading. The data, official data anyway, on African American unemployment has only been collected since the 1970s. While it is currently at a low point, claiming that it is in the history of the United States goes too far. Hispanic American and Asian American unemployment have also reached their lowest levels in the history of our country. Misleading. The Asian American statistic has been around for only about 2 decades. And it has increased to 3% in August 2018 after reaching a low of 2% in May. It was as low as 2.6% under Obama. And like for the African Americans unemployment, the statistic for American Hispanics has only been collected since the 1970s. It did reach a low of 4.5% in July 2018, but the day after this speech, the August figure showed an increase to 4.7%. Youth unemployment has just reached its lowest rate in nearly half a century. This claim was accurate. The youth aged 16 to 24 unemployment rate was 8.6% in July and 8.4% in August. It was as low as 8.1% in 1969. Unemployment for Americans, this is so important, without a high school diploma has reached the lowest level ever recorded. Accurate. Unemployment for high school dropouts did fall to a record low of 5.1% in July 2018. However, this data has only been collected since the mid-1990s. The day after Trump spoke, the rate jumped to 5.7% in August. Women's unemployment recently reached its lowest rate in nearly 65 years. Misleading. The women's unemployment rate dipped to 3.6% in May 2018, which was its lowest level in 65 years, but climbed back up in June, July, and August. We've added 100,000 jobs building pipelines and supporting the production of oil and natural gas. Mostly accurate. Trump appears to be citing a BLS statistic for mining jobs, of which about 75% are in support of oil and gas production. The plunge in oil prices that started in 2014 wiped out nearly 200,000 jobs in the oil and gas support sector by October 2016. But a recent stabilization in oil prices has helped bring some of those jobs back. However, Trump exaggerates his administration's policies' role in this decline. We've added something great to our portfolio by increasing exports of clean, beautiful coal by over 60%. 60%. Coal exports did increase by 61% from 2016 to 2017. However, the United States did not export clean coal. There is no such thing as clean coal. Coal is actually, as far as I know, a rather severely polluting fossil fuel. In the first 8 months of 2018, Montana coal production increased by 2.5 million tons. This was mostly accurate. However, local news reports said that a temporary partial shutdown of the coal-fired Colstrip power plant may affect production numbers for the rest of the year. The average Montana family of 4 will take home $2,281 extra this year, and many will take home much more than that. Misleading. Here, Trump cited a statistic circulated by congressional Republicans focusing on a family of 4. However, the Montana Department of Revenue, which, by the way, probably includes largely Republican officials, given the fact that Montana is mostly a Republican state, said the average tax cut would be $1,618 in 2018, with big differences in income levels. Our tax cut saves family farms and ranchers and small businesses from unfair estate tax, also known as the death tax. False. The federal estate tax rarely falls on farms or small businesses, since only those leaving behind after they die in their will over $5 million pay it. According to the Tax Policy Center, almost 5,500 estates in 2017 out of nearly 3 million were subject to the tax. Of those, only 80 taxable estates would be farms and small businesses. By the way, Dodd-Frank, little thing, I fixed it. Dodd-Frank has been changed. Accurate. Congress passed a watering down of Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, which Trump signed. However, he did not mention the fact that Tester was a co-sponsor of the legislation. We're canceling Obama's illegal anti-coal so-called Clean Power Plan. Clean Power Plan is out of business now. We're going to have clean power, but it's not going to be under the Clean Power Plan. Misleading. This claim lacks important context. Obama's Clean Power Plan never took effect because it was stayed by the Supreme Court in 2016. Trump's efforts to rework it also face litigation. We passed Veterans' Choice, giving our veterans the right to see a private doctor if he has to wait on line for the rest of his life. Misleading. The law passed, but veterans are still facing long wait times. We also passed the landmark Veterans Affairs Accountability Act. They've been trying to pass both of them for more than 45 years. I got them both passed. Misleading. And the Department of Veterans Affairs Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act of 2017 builds on the firing authority given to the VA Secretary through the Choice, Accountability and Transparency Act of 2014, which was enacted in response to the 2014 Phoenix VA scandal. We secured a record $700 billion for our military this year and $716 billion next year for our military. This claim was accurate. At my direction, the Pentagon is working hard to create a sixth branch of the United States Armed Forces, the Space Force. Mostly accurate, Trump has announced the creation of a Space Force, but so far Congress has reacted coolly or skeptically to that announcement. I withdrew the United States from the horrible Iran deal. This was accurate. I also recognized the capital of Israel and opened the American embassy in Jerusalem. This was accurate. Trump took this step on December the 6th, 2017. The embassy is already built. It's built about 20 years ahead of budget and schedule. I would say we're probably about 20 years. You know that story. I'm not going to tell it, but we built it real fast. We have the best location. They're all looking for a location. And a friend of mine, the ambassador to Israel, said, "Oh, but we already have the best piece of land in all of Israel, best piece of land in Jerusalem, and we have a building on it. Let's renovate it." So instead of spending $1.2 billion, we spent $400,000. That was a sale. False. The U.S. spent about $400,000 to upgrade a consular facility and to relabel it an embassy. However, it also signed a contract for over $20 million in security upgrades for the facility. So the initial cost is 100 times more than Trump's claim. However, this is only a temporary facility. A major embassy generally costs between $500 million and $1 billion. When Abraham Lincoln made the Gettysburg Address speech, the great speech, do you know he was ridiculed? He was ridiculed. He was excoriated by the fake news. They had fake news then. He was excoriated. They said it was a terrible, terrible speech. Misleading. Reaction to Lincoln's speech was divided along partisan lines. The New York Times, then Republican-leaning, praised it and printed it in the newspaper. Democratic-leaning publications were critical, and we of course have to remember that the United States had a civil war then, and a great majority of those who were fighting against the Union were indeed Democrats, or at least Democratic sympathizers. Because then, of course, most of the southern, or great majority of the southern states, were Democratic anyway. Maybe dyed in the wool Democratic. He took the horse and carriage up from the White House. He rode it partially in that carriage and partially at a desk in the Lincoln bedroom, which is incredible, by the way, in the White House. False. Lincoln traveled by train for 80 miles, or about 129 kilometers. And he, by the way, wrote the speech over a 2-week period in the White House before his departure. 4 years, you watched as your leaders apologized to other countries for America. They apologized. We're so sorry. We're so sorry. So sorry. False. Trump here references a phony talking point advanced by Republicans during Barack Obama's presidency, that Obama apologized for America. The fact checker examined each of the citations for Obama's so-called apology tour and found they were often taken out of context. Obama never said he apologized or was sorry. George W. Bush, a fellow Republican president, by the way, however, did say he was sorry for the humiliation suffered by the Iraqi prisoners and the humiliation suffered by their families after reports of prisoner abuse emerged in Iraq. So, sorry for this ranting, sorry for impersonating Trump and so forth. Sorry if I was too critical, but anyway, already this analysis of Trump's campaign speech, if you want to call it that, even though he's not on the ballot himself, shows that he has, just like, for example, Bill Clinton and various other US presidents, trouble telling the truth, especially the full truth. So his supporters have to take that into consideration, and especially those of them who claim to be born-again Christians have to stop uncritically supporting him, in my opinion. God bless you all.